أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة رافعة إذا رجت الأرض رجا وبست الجبال بسا فكانت هباء منبثا وكنتم أزواجا ثلاثة فأصحاب الميمنة ما أصحاب الميمنة وأصحاب المشأمة ما أصحاب المشأمة والسابقون السابقون أولئك المقربون في جنات النعيم ثلة من الأولين وقليل من الآخرين على سرر موضونة متكئين عليها متقابلين يطوف عليهم ولدان مخلدون بأكواب وأباريك وكأس من معين لا يصدعون عنها ولا ينزفون وفاكهة مما يتخيرون ولحم طير مما يشتهون وحور عين كأمثال اللؤلؤ المكنون جزاء بما كانوا يعملون لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا تأثيما إلا قيلا سلاما سلاما وأصحاب اليمين ما أصحاب اليمين في سدر مخضود وطلح منضود وظل ممدود وماء مسكوب وفاكهة كثيرة لا مقطوعة ولا ممنوعة وفرش مرفوعة إنا أنشأناهن إنشاء فجعلناهن أبكارا عربا أترابا لأصحاب اليمين ثلة من الأولين وثلة من الآخرين وأصحاب الشمال ما أصحاب الشمال في سموم وحميم وظل من يحموم لا بارد ولا كريم إنهم كانوا قبل ذلك مترفين وكانوا يصرون على الحنث العظيم وكانوا يقولون أإذا متنا وكنا ترابا وإذا من أئنا لمبعوثون أو آباؤنا الأولون قل إن الأولين والآخرين لمجموعون إلى ميقات يوم معلوم ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون لآكلون من شجر من زقوم فمالئون منها البطون فشاربون عليه من الحميم فشاربون شرب الهيم هذا نزلهم يوم الدين نحن خلقناكم فلولا تصدقون أفرأيتم ما تمنون أأنتم تخلقونه أم نحن الخالقون نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون ولقد علمتم النشأة الأولى فلولا تذكرون أفرأيتم ما تحرثون أأنتم تزرعونه أم نحن الزارعون لو نشاء لجعلناه حطاما فظلتم تفكهون إنا لمغرمون بل نحن محرومون أفرأيتم الماء الذي تشربون أأنتم أنزلتموه من المزن أم نحن المنزلون لو نشاء جعلناه أجاجا فلولا تشكرون أفرأيتم النار التي تورون أأنتم أنشأتم شجرتها أم نحن المنشئون نحن جعلناها تذكرة ومتاعا للمقوين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم فلا أقسم بمواقع النجوم وإنه لقسم لو تعلمون عظيم إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين أفبهذا الحديث أنتم مدهنون وتجعلون رزقكم أنكم تكذبون فلولا إذا بلغت الحلقوم وأنتم حينئذ تنظرون ونحن أقرب إليه منكم ولكن لا تبصرون فلولا إن كنتم غير مدينين ترجعونها إن كنتم صادقين فأما إن كان من المقربين فروح وريحان وجنة نعيم وأما إن كان من أصحاب اليمين فسلام لك من أصحاب اليمين وأما إن كان من المكذبين الضالين فنزل من حميم وتصلية جحيم إن هذا لهو حق اليقين فسبح باسم ربك العظيم صدق الله العلي العظيم. الفاتحة.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحت كل عصام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلحمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأهوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجل ذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائه ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترتا وكم من فادهم من البلاء أقلتا وكم من عثار وقيتا وكم من مكروه نفعتا وكم من ثناء جميل لست أحلا له نشرتا. اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد عملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومطالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وانفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي. نكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعد أوامرك. فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا، مستغفرا منيبا، مقرا مذعنا معترفا. لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري، وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري، وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، ورقة جلدي، ودقة عظمي. يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، حبني لابتداء كرمك وسالف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت، أن تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمت. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا، وبشكرك مادحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضوائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعا، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعا، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنا. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم. يا ربي وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه، قليل مكثور، يسير بقاء، قصير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه، ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك. وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الضليل الحقير المسكين المستقيم أجمعين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أذج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي؟ فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فحبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي. صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وحبني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذجن إليك بين أهل هذا جيج العاملين، ولا أصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولا أبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك نسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وذاق طعن عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يذج إليك ذجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوت وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربا؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاهدك، وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالعنآم متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تحب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل أمرت وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت أخفيته أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواره وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير أنزلت أو إحسان فضلت أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب أسأله بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا وأعمالي عندك مقبولا حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليه معولي يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب قوي على خدمتك جوارحي واشدد على عزيمة جوانه وحبلي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرن ومن كادني فكن واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما ومن علي بحسن عجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم العجابة فإليك يا ربي نسبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي وبلغني منايا ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. سورة المباركة الفاتحة.
Respected elders, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Surah Fatiha is requested for all marhumin listed on the screen as well as all other marhumin. Surah Waqi'ah. Dua Shafa'i Mariz is requested for all those in need here and elsewhere, as well as those listed on the screen. Let us recite together. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarza da'ahu yakshifu su. Amma yujibul mustarza أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. At this time, please turn your attention towards the screen for a video followed by a brief presentation by Brother Rizwan Jamad from Birmingham Jamaat. Brother Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, Salawat.
The Al-Abbas Islamic Center in Birmingham is excited about the construction of its new center. We seek to build an extended Imam Barga and Masjid, which will be more than double the size of its previous center. Additional facilities include a much larger kitchen, parent and baby rooms, and facilities for those with special needs. We want to build a center that caters for our diverse community. Our future plans include building a multi-purpose sports complex. Our vision is to build a spiritual and vibrant community from cradle to the grave. At present, the steelworks are being installed for our new center. Thereafter, the brickwork will start, and inshallah, in the next 6 to 8 months, the shell of our new center will be ready. The total cost of the project is £7.4 million. We are currently halfway there. Please support us so that we can realize our dream of building our new center.
Assalamu alaikum. So as you heard, my name is Rizwan and I'm from Birmingham, UK, and I'm visiting here. I'm on holiday, but while I'm here, I thought I'd seize the opportunity and talk to you briefly. As you saw the video, Birmingham Jamaat has started its own project. We are trying to build our own center because Birmingham has grown in size in the last 10, 20 years, and we have doubled the size in numbers as well as activities. Ever since we had Sheikh Nuru join us, we have got 30 subcommittees that run weekly programs to cater for the needs of our community, and lots of activities happening. But our center was too small, and we have now embarked on a mission, an £8 million mission to create a center that meets the needs of our community, the youth, the children, as you saw, with lots of extra facilities and everything. However, We've reached halfway from approximately £8 million. We've reached £4 million. We've raised funds. And we're here looking for donations. And I know what you're thinking. Mazahir is laughing there. And he's saying, Bana, apro project green che alko ne ape, apro project green manake. Orange. I was just making sure you're listening. So I know you're thinking, Bana, apro project ma de, alko ne de, kya, alko ne de so to apro su thase. Be baju dio, badu thai jase, inshallah. Inshallah. So please donate generously to a project. So we started construction. We are hoping to end by the end of next year. So your donations will go a long way. We are fortunate here to have Brother Irfan Jan Muhammad. He is also an EC member. He used to be a resident here before, but I'm sure he's left Orlando 10 years ago. You've all forgotten him. So I'm going to ask him to come forward so you can still remember him. He's put on a bit of weight, white hair, but let him come up.
Everybody knows me.
So that's my brother, if you have a brother-in-law. So if you've got any questions about the project, if you want to donate, if you want to do any pledges, please speak to him. He's going to help you out. There are also local arrangements made at your treasury desk, and there's also an online link that you can donate to the project. And I shall not take much of your time. I think that's about it. Yes, I've covered everything. Thank you very much, and wassalam.
Now let us call upon Dr. Shabir Ali Bhai to come forward for tonight's discussion. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
to start? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. My elders, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's my great pleasure to be back to speak to this community again, and I'm honored for this invitation to speak on the topic of aging gracefully. Some of you have heard related content that I've spoken about in previous years, and for that I apologize, but I know many of the faces in the room have not heard this, so I hope there will be some useful information for you, inshallah. I'm going to talk about the following. This is an outline. I will briefly introduce the idea of aging and the notion of aging in different parts of the body. I'll spend a few minutes then talking about the notion of aging well, because I think we all want to age well, but we may have different meanings in our own minds, and I'll touch on some of the literature when people, older adults as well as scientists and thinkers, have been asked, what does aging well mean to people? And then we'll focus really on things that we can do. I have 10 or 11 key tips based on the best evidence from our current understanding of science for things that can maximize, inshallah, our healthy aging for as long as Allah gives us life. And then I'll summarize at the end, inshallah. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers after, just looking at the time to make sure that I stay on time. So let's start off. I think everyone knows that every major industrialized country, the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, all other major Western countries have an aging population. These are data from Canada, from Statistics Canada in particular, that produces annual numbers to show the proportion of people who are aging. And as you can see, what this shows is only individuals aged 60 and older in different colors. A couple of years ago, an important thing happened in Canada, and similar things are happening in the United States and elsewhere. The total number of older adults, 65 and older, for the first time in our history, about 3 years ago, was greater than the number of young people aged 16 and under. For the first time in the history of Canada, and we will probably never go back to the curves reversing. In other words, our society continues to age. Not only is it aging, but if you look at the top bars, the purple and the blue, these are individuals aged 80 to 89, 90 to 99, and way at the top, a small little yellow line that shows people 100 and older. I see some of these people in my clinic, and they are amazing. They've lived an entire century, and some of them still walk, most of them still talk, many of them still have many of their daily functions. So society is aging, and the number of people around us are continuing to age. So what is old? Well, first of all, it's not a simple black and white. It's not that at age 65 we transition from one type of human being to another where we have suddenly changed and all of our organs and tissues have changed dramatically. Rather, it is a gradual process. Sorry, I'm coordinating two sets of slides. Where as we get older, the number of changes in the body increase, the changes related to aging that I will describe shortly. So it's not a black and white sudden phenomenon, slowly but surely. What may be a little bit more upsetting to the audience, but it's reality, so welcome to the world of aging, is that by the time you reach age 30, you have reached peak function in virtually every organ and tissue. And after that, it's all downhill. We are all aging every day, and we have nothing we can do to date that's going to reverse that process. We have things that can slow it down, and soon we will have some things that may partially reverse it, but not yet. This is a graphic, and I'll go over a little bit of the detail of this in subsequent slides, but this came from a medical article that summarized all the major organs in the body and the different ways in which they age. And there are literally hundreds of aging changes, and virtually every one of them involves some organ, tissue, or function that starts to decrease as we get older. There are very few things that get better as we get older, other than perhaps wisdom. But outside of that, every organ and tissue is slowly aging. Whether it's our muscle, whether it's our liver, whether it's kidneys, bone marrow, skin, lungs, etc. Every single organ system is aging. But importantly, they're aging at different rates. So for example, here we have 8 of the major organ systems in the body, from the neurological system, the lung, the heart, the kidney, etc. And you will see that each one of them is aging at a different rate. And so some of these organs, as they age, we will feel them more earlier than later. For example, if you look at the 5th line from the top, the 3rd red line, that's the gastrointestinal system. It is rare that even by the time you reach age 90, that you will have major problems in your stomach, your small intestines, and large intestines in terms of the ability to absorb nutrients, digest food, that's going to affect you as a function of age. Whereas in some parts of the body, for example, the 2nd line from the bottom, the reproductive system, it's very hard to be able to have children in a healthy way and a normal way once we reach, particularly for women, once they reach about age 45 or 50, the ovaries shut down. For men, it's a little more gradual process, but some organ systems change much more rapidly than others, and some affect our health more than others. So again, 2nd and 3rd lines, the lungs and the heart, so involved in our day-to-day exercise, but the lungs have much more capacity to be able to age slowly and have a lot of redundancy or extra capacity. The heart, on the other hand, has less capacity. And so we are much more likely to be affected by heart disease and also changes with age from our heart and related blood vessels than we are from the lungs and the alveoli and everything within our respiratory system. So again, we talk about some of the aging changes, but that doesn't answer the question of what is aging well. So aging well is not aging in a well, but rather the idea that as we get older, we are hoping to preserve some elements of function that keep us in a way that we conceptualize wellness or health. And so there are many different definitions of what is aging well or healthy aging. And there are different perspectives if you ask an evolutionary biologist, if you ask people like myself who study aging and disease in older adults, we're geriatricians, or if you ask older adults themselves or their children and grandchildren. The World Health Organization, which tries to collect the wisdom of scientists from around the world, they define healthy aging as follows, quote, the process of developing and maintaining the functional ability that enables well-being in older age. And this includes physical and mental capacity, environmental characteristics, which we may not all think are part of aging, and cultural factors that impact on how we see ourselves as we age. What does that mean exactly? Well, if you ask older adults, it's a little bit more clear. So for example, there was a large study in Canada called the Canadian Study of Health and Aging that took several thousand older adults and studied them every few years as they aged, from age 50 onwards. And they interviewed a series of them from a variety of ethnic backgrounds, and 3 common themes came up over and over across all cultures. People wanted to maintain an active lifestyle where they could go out and be physically active and interact with family and friends and exercise and play sports. They wanted to be able to be physically active and capable so that they had the physical strength and stamina to do what they wanted. They also talked about the idea of attitude, that we have a positive attitude, recognizing we're all aging, recognizing every organ system is aging, but recognizing also that we have much to be grateful for and being positive about all the things we have learned and accumulated over the decades of our lives and looking forward to our futures. And when you ask older adults with cancer, because this is an area that I study a lot, when you ask them what are their priorities or goals as they're going through a treatment for cancer, whether it's curative or non-curative, they talk about 3 major things in addition to living longer. Living longer is one of the 4 big priorities, but it's not always number 1. So for them, and I think this will resonate with the audience, they want to preserve function and be independent as long as possible. Most of us don't see ourselves aging well if we need to rely on other people. We want to be independent. They want to preserve their quality of life, and they want to preserve their cognitive function, because the mind is one of the most precious things that defines who we are. Even if we are physically less capable, to lose our mind is a terrible tragedy, and most of us really want to avoid that at any cost. So there's a lot of anti-aging medications and other things that are out there. Some of you may recognize who's in that picture, but I won't say. But there's a lot of these tablets and various products that are advertised out there in the public, anti-aging, and if we could only buy it in a box and take 1 pill a day or 3 pills a day, we would be able to reverse aging. I wish, but there's a multi-billion-dollar agency out there, or multi-billion-dollar set of organizations and factors out there that are taking all of your money and a little bit of mine, and trying to promote this idea of anti-aging. Unfortunately, as you'll see, there's hardly a shred of evidence for almost any of it, despite the fact that they continue to sell billions and billions of dollars worth of product. The marketing is very good. Instead, what I'm going to go over are the strategies that you can do to help try and maintain successful and healthy aging. And by the way, this doesn't begin at age 75 or 65 or even 50. These strategies can be implemented even earlier, but most of the data suggests that we should really be focusing on doing these as we get into our 40s and 50s in order to try to preserve our bodies as long as possible. That doesn't mean you can't start in your 60s or 70s or 80s, but the problem is you've already lost a fair bit of health, and it's harder to go backwards. But you can at least preserve what you've got, even if you start later. These strategies are based on the best and highest quality evidence that I have seen in the last 25 years that I've been practicing and studying as a scientist. So the first is eat whole foods. And by eating whole foods, I don't mean that Whole Foods. Rather, I mean the idea of eating whole foods, and there's 3 major diets that compete for the most success in being able to promote healthy aging and slow down the various processes of aging. And by the way, I should formally define aging one more time, and that is, these are universal changes that occur in every member of a given species, whether it's a fly or a human, as time progresses from birth. They're not disease, therefore they cannot be reversed as the way we would treat illness. These are changes that occur in all of our bodies, whether it's graying of hair or losing of hair, whether it's wrinkling of skin, whether it's our arteries getting stiffer. Part of these changes are due to aging and occur in every single member of the human species, and virtually every other mammal and many reptiles, etc. And so these are changes of age. They're not due to illness. There's a debate about some of them. For example, I'll give you just one example and then we'll come back to this. Cataract. If you look at 95-year-olds around the world, virtually every single one of them, whether male or female, whatever culture, country they're in, will have cataracts. But there is a debate still in the aging eye scientific community whether cataracts are simply due to aging or not. And the majority of people believe it is not due to aging, but primarily due to the beautiful sunlight we have. And that accelerates through UV light. It accelerates changes in our eyes such that we have cataracts in our 60s, 70s, and 80s. The only way you can prove that is to find a group of people that have lived in the dark for decades. And that's very hard to find in the world today. But many people believe that even cataracts, even though they're seen in virtually every single older adult, they're due to exposure to the environment and not aging intrinsically alone. But anyway, so 3 major diets that are shown to have the best success in terms of aging, and it's not that one is exclusive to another. One can adopt elements from all 3. I'll talk about the one that has the most evidence and most widely promoted in the scientific community, and that is the Mediterranean diet. And we don't have a lot of time for interaction now. We'll go over questions and answers later. But there are 5 key elements of a Mediterranean diet. And the more of these we can implement, the more likely we will be able to reap the benefits and slow down aging of the body and the brain. Those 5 elements are to eat less red meat and more chicken, particularly skinless chicken. The second is to eat fish, particularly deep whitewater fish, but almost any fish is good at least 2 or 3 times a week, 1 serving at a time. 1 serving is about that much thickness, the size of your palm. And of course, it changes based on your body size. The third is to aim for 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil per day. Olive oil is probably one of the healthiest oils out there with a high amount of monounsaturated fats. to have 5 to 10 servings of fruit and vegetables that are fresh and raw rather than cooked or steamed, because virtually every fruit and vegetable denatures and loses some of its health benefits when you cook it. Other than maybe tomatoes, which we widely use, outside of that, virtually everything else is best raw or minimally cooked, certainly not deep fried. And of course, a handful of nuts every day. And it doesn't matter what type of nuts. Some people say pine nuts are the best, but we don't have great data. But really, any type of nut is good to have a handful of each day. Again, these are general health strategies. There may be exceptions for individuals with particular illnesses. Second thing is regular exercise. And the guidelines have shown that if you can aim for 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, or 150 minutes of aerobic activity, so that's getting your heart rate up, as well as doing resistance training twice a week, you have the best chance of delaying many age-related diseases that affect your heart, that affect your muscles and bones, etc. It's hard to get up to these numbers all the time. There are data that show that even if you can do 5 minutes twice a day of walking, even that has health benefits. But you keep getting more benefit with the more that you do, and it starts to peak around 150 minutes a week. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do more, but the amount of extra benefit becomes much smaller. And so aiming for 150 minutes would be great, along with some stretching and flexibility, because as we get older, our tendons need more warm up and cool down. Otherwise, we risk injury, and there are many health benefits of these. Okay, third strategy, and these are not in any particular order. It's not that number one's more important than number two. The third is to stay socially connected, and this is important for all of us. Particularly, we saw during the COVID pandemic the impact it had when we were socially isolating, whether in the United States or Canada or elsewhere. It was devastating to mental health. Maintaining social networks, ideally in person, which is more powerful than virtual, which is more powerful than nothing at all. But avoiding the notion of being lonely. Even if we are in company, some of us feel unengaged and disconnected and feel lonely. That feeling of loneliness is dangerous for our minds as well as our emotions. And we need to also not only find ways to engage with other people, but the most successfully aged people in the world tend to describe that they do things that bring them meaning. Not just that they interact with people, but things that bring meaning and satisfaction, often helping other people, volunteering, things like that are far more powerful than just, I go out every week and meet with my friends and we go exercise or watch a movie. That's less meaningful than activities where you're engaging with other people and helping them and getting something back that brings meaning and joy to your life. Having purpose, whether you're 30 or 90. The fourth is to stop smoking, and we still see portions of people in the world where smoking is common, but smoking rates have decreased in most of the world. And smoking affects so many organs and tissues in our body, and within 1 year of stopping smoking, heart disease rates drop substantially, and within 7 years of stopping smoking, our risk of lung cancer drops almost 90% and gets very close to that of a lifetime non-smoker. So there are many organ systems that benefit from stopping smoking, no matter what age you stop at. Even some of my patients with lung cancer will stop smoking and they can live longer, even at that stage, once they've developed it. So it's never too late to stop. I won't go into the fatwas of our mujtahid about smoking, though. But we can talk about in the question period if you want. So number 5 is some form of meditation or stress reduction, whether these are mindfulness strategies, yoga, tai chi, things that give calmness to the mind and give us a period of inner reflection. Some people do tasbih, recite Quran. There are many strategies, religious and otherwise, that give us time in quiet spaces for ourselves. Gives the mind an opportunity to be able to collect its thoughts and not be so distracted by the world. I think the bottom part's cut off there slightly, sorry. Strategic use of supplements. And by this I mean that despite the multi-billion-dollar industry out there trying to peddle a variety of products, the only things that have any reasonable evidence to date for the majority of people are vitamin D, even in sunny Florida, but certainly in snowy Canada, maybe a general multivitamin supplement, and really not much else has shown consistent value for the average older adult. There are some exceptions, But in general, there's not a lot else. So if you want to keep taking your curcumin or quercetin or ginkgo biloba, etc., you can. They're generally harmless, other than hitting your pocketbook. They're probably not doing a lot of good, though. Number 7, people talk about this, and many scientists still don't believe it, but the data are getting stronger and stronger, that maintaining optimism and a sense of hope, not necessarily that will reverse aging, but maintaining optimism and being able to look at the positive side of things will decrease the likelihood of several mental health-related conditions in older age, decrease stress, and even reduce the risk of heart disease. Okay, getting enough sleep. On average, people in their 50s and 60s and older should be aiming for about 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep on average. This is numbers that affect over 90% of the population per night. Now, if you take naps in the day, that's not harmful, but that nap time is included in total sleep time. So if you take an hour nap, you're not aiming for 7.5 to 9 more hours at night. Recognize, however, that age affects many aspects of sleep. You will not sleep the way your children or grandchildren can sleep, and it's a little bit harder to sleep. We wake up more often at night, but the majority of older adults in healthy aging communities in places like Brazil and China and Japan and Africa still maintain great sleeping habits and get a good night's sleep and feel restored and energetic in the morning. If you're not feeling those things, you may need to rethink your sleep habit, and you may need to look into sleep-related illnesses that some people have. Number 9, maintain a healthy body weight. Unfortunately, like virtually every other community in industrialized countries, most of our community, whether in Toronto or in Orlando, is overweight. That's men or women. The majority of us are not at our optimal body weight and have not been for some years. Mild overweight is probably good for us as we get into our 60s and 70s, but certainly not more than mild overweight. There are different measures of defining what is an ideal body weight. A reasonable measure, not perfect, but a reasonable one that's easy for most people to use to calculate for themselves is body mass index, which many of you know is your weight in kilograms divided by your height in meters squared. There are other ones that may be slightly better, like waist circumference, but BMI is a good starting point. And the best BMI for middle-aged South Asians, like most of us here, should be about 23. By the time you get to 65, it should be about 25. Most of our community is between 27 and 32. So we are, on the whole, overweight, and some of us are obese. It's not good for us in many ways. Number 10. Health screening. There are a series of screening maneuvers that have been shown to have more benefit than harm. And yes, screening can have harm, so we need to acknowledge that. But these strategies can help to reduce our risk of harms for a number of different conditions. So screening for colon cancer, whether colonoscopy or the fecal occult blood immunochemical test, at least until age 75 or 80 if you're in good health. Breast cancer screening with mammography in women. Prostate cancer screening, particularly in the Black community at a slightly younger age. Getting blood pressure checks regularly, one of the most important things we can do. There's a lot of high blood pressure in the Indian community particularly. We have bad genes for that, as well as diabetes, which is why we gain a little weight, the risk of blood pressure and diabetes goes up much more for us than for the white community or for example, the East Asian or Southeast Asian communities. Screening for diabetes with simple blood sugar testing. And at least once after the age of 65, many guidelines recommend both women and men should be screened for osteoporosis with a simple bone mineral density test. The guidelines are stronger and more consistent for women, but 1 in 8 men has osteoporosis after the age of 65 and 1 in 4 women. And particularly for all of us who don't exercise, we don't get enough calcium, we drink too much tea and coffee, the risks are higher. Number 11, vaccines can save lives and reduce disability. We all know about COVID vaccine. It's been hammered in our heads. Unfortunately, COVID booster rates have dropped dramatically in most of the United States and Canada. We're far less worried about COVID than before, but COVID is still killing people. It killed one of our ex-presidents in our Jamaat just recently after being in the ICU for weeks. and he was vaccinated. So the vaccine is certainly not 100% effective, but it can reduce the risk of hospitalization, ICU, and death substantially in anyone who's an adult, but particularly anyone with any kind of chronic condition or advanced age, because our immune systems weaken. Getting an influenza shot every year, the pneumonia vaccine every 10 years, the herpes zoster vaccine for shingles. The new kid on the block is the respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV, which affects predominantly young children and seniors and can be devastating. And right now is the season where RSV is going around along with flu and COVID, so it's a dangerous time. But these are important. Wind up your presentation. He's losing bone mass. So this is just a reminder to me to wrap up. I think I have, do I have 5 minutes, Mustafa? I think, or who's timing me? I have 5 minutes. Because the one last thing I will talk about, because this comes up over and over, is I just want to present a couple of minutes on preventing dementia, because this comes up a lot. Dementia is not due to age alone, but age is one of the biggest risk factors for dementia. By the time we reach 85, 1 in 3 of us will develop dementia, and of that, 50 to 60% of them will have Alzheimer's. So extremely common, but certainly not universal by the time you reach 85 or even 90. This was a study that was published a couple of years ago, a beautiful study that examined 34 different studies, combined them using advanced mathematical techniques to find the most important risk factors that we can modify that can reduce our risk of developing dementia by, depending on what estimate you use in the mathematical model, 41 to 78% reduction in the risk of developing dementia in late life if you start doing these things in midlife. And midlife is between 35 and 55, depending on the study. The 5 risk factors are avoiding diabetes, or controlling it as best you can, avoiding obesity, avoiding high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and smoking. And every one of these can be modified. Some are easier than others. I will just present a little bit of data to let you know that there are 2 new risk factors that have come into our science in the last couple of years, but they are each a little bit controversial. The first is correcting hearing loss. As we get older, everyone's hearing gets worse, but some people have more severe hearing loss. And as we lose hearing, the idea is that partly we are not interacting with the environment as much. We start to shut it off because you can only crank up the volume so much in people around you. It's easier to crank it up on the television. But also that leads to less stimulus of our brain. If our brain is not being stimulated like every other organ in the body, if you don't use it, you lose it. And brain cells start to shrink. The complicated networks of all the various neurons in the brain just start to lose their rich connections, and you start to be more vulnerable to the effects of age and other factors, and you end up with more rapid development of dementia. The evidence is still conflicting, but there are many other benefits on correcting hearing loss, and some studies suggest that it may prevent dementia. Not all studies, but no studies have shown harm. So some studies suggest it may benefit, and others say that it's neutral. So the jury is still out. And recently, there are a couple of studies that have shown that for the average senior, 1 multivitamin a day that includes B vitamins and zinc and riboflavin and other components may reduce the risk of developing mild cognitive impairment and dementia, but not all studies agree yet, and it's still early data. But relatively low risk of harm with 1 multivitamin a day. Just make sure that it covers the range, because the bigger it is, the more likely it covers what you need. The small ones that are easy to swallow, just don't pack in all the vitamins. Okay, let me summarize. Most seniors are going to live for at least 17 to 20 years after they turn age 65. That's a long time to live and age. And I hope we age well, inshallah. The common illnesses in old age can include things like cancer and dementia, and osteoporosis, heart disease, hypertension, arthritis, depression. There are so many illnesses that can affect us. Many of these have elements that can be prevented or delayed or reduce their severity. So there are multiple opportunities to prevent disease through things like a good diet, regular exercise, maintaining social engagement, adequate sleep, meditation, and getting screened for health, and maybe a few vaccines and a vitamin or 2. But it is important to recognize that most of the data that we have still come from predominantly North American and European white populations. There are less data in Indians, and there are less data in blacks and other communities, but the data in all of those communities that we have, even though it's much less than in the whites, it shows very similar patterns. There's no major discrepancies, other than the fact that Indians have a few genetic curses. Even though we may be good at managing money in business, we have a few issues in terms of diabetes, high blood pressure, and cholesterol that we have to be more careful about. I have some references here. My slides will be shared. And with that, I thank you, and I'm happy to take questions. Assalamu alaikum. I'm not sure how we're handling the question period. Online, in person, by hand. In person? Is there a mic, or people are just speaking up? Oh, okay. Thank you. Nobody wants to ask the first question? I think, is that a question there in the ladies? And before you ask your question, sir, I'm just going to mention to the audience, sometimes when I go to these, people will start asking very specific questions related to their own particular health circumstances. Let's try and keep them generalized, because getting into very particulars about an individual person's health, it's very hard to do that and get a whole story in a minute or less.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So just some general questions. One is, maybe you can shed some light based on your practice on what are some of the anti-aging, nutraceuticals that you think are helpful. For example, collagen or biotin and things that, you hear a lot about and patients start taking, or even, osteobioflex and things like that, chondroitin and things like that for arthritis. And then the other question is calcium supplementation, especially in women, in terms of, preventing osteoporosis. What's the adequate right number? Looking at heart risk as well in terms of taking calcium. So perhaps you can shed some light on that.
Great question. Thank you. So in terms of nutraceuticals, the industry is far ahead of the science in so many ways, and this is partly a problem. Many times, it's not that we have evidence that shows that they don't work, it's that we have no good evidence. So as a scientist, it's very hard for me to say, substance X is great or substance X is terrible. Most of the time I can say, substance X seems to be safe, and I don't know if it's going to help, because there's a lot of areas where we don't have data. There are areas where we do have some data. So, for example, there are early data to suggest that turmeric, haldi or hardar, has health benefits, particularly when absorbed with black pepper for maximal absorption, in order to reduce inflammation in people who have inflammatory forms of arthritis, or who have certain inflammatory conditions, or have certain types of cancer. The data are very preliminary, and based on small human studies and some animal studies, they suggest they're safe. They may have some effect. There's been so much data on studies for arthritis, because arthritis affects so many people, especially as you get older and if you're overweight and we don't exercise, which is many of us. And so there's some data on glucosamine, with or without chondroitin, that have suggested that a proportion of people who take it, probably somewhere between 20 and 35% of people who are on chondroitin and glucosamine combined, which I still recommend for my patients to try, for up to 3 months, whether or not you add in MSM. The data on MSM are much less clear. But glucosamine plus chondroitin may reduce the pain of arthritis, and in a small proportion of people, it may reduce the progression on X-rays of the damage that we see in the joints. Unfortunately, there are some studies that have suggested no effect, and so the jury is still out overall. But I think it's reasonable for people to give it a try and see if they feel any benefits within 3 months of giving it a trial. Outside of those, there's no other nutraceutical for which I will give any strong recommendation to any of my patients to take at this point in time. There's some that I will tell people to avoid under specific circumstances. In general, I am neutral. That if people want to take them, it's their choice. The data are just simply not there to justify them in my view, and there are others who will disagree. That's my interpretation of the science. In terms of the calcium, so a couple of things to keep in mind. The pendulum has swung away from aiming for 1,500 milligrams of calcium. We also know that if you had a choice between calcium and vitamin D for your bones, that vitamin D is the more powerful nutrient compared to calcium if you could only choose one. Of course, we don't have to choose just one, but vitamin D has more effects on bone than calcium. Next thing we know is that calcium effects are best in your children and grandchildren. By the time they reach between 18 and 21, everybody has formed peak bone mass. After that, it's all downhill. The bones will just start shrinking away. Women who go through menopause, you get accelerated bone loss in the first 1 to 3 years after. And then it just keeps going down in women and goes down in men as well. With adequate calcium, you can slow that down a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. It is best to take calcium from the diet, but it's hard for people to be able to get enough calcium in the diet. My recommendations these days are aiming for 700 to 1,000 milligrams of calcium total from all sources, and ideally from the diet. Because we know that supplemental calcium has a higher risk of causing kidney stones and stomach aches and constipation. The relationship between calcium from tablets and the risk of heart disease remains controversial. There are some data to suggest that excess calcium from supplements may end up increasing the calcification of arteries, but the majority of studies suggest that that's simply not true and that these are correlational studies without evidence of causation. But there are some studies that suggest that. There are no studies that have shown that high calcium from diet is associated with any risk of harm to blood vessels. And so calcium from the diet for sure is safe from everything we know, but calcium in supplementation, I generally recommend very few people need any more than 500 milligrams of calcium from tablets, and most people can get it from the diet. And if you're dairy-free, there are alternatives to dairy products because dairy products have the most calcium. There are dairy-free forms of milk, soya milk, almond milk, etc. There are fortified orange juices that have calcium in them, that people can get most of their calcium from these sources. But as I say, if you're not sure how much calcium you're getting or how much you need, there are some great online calculators that you can put in your own diet within 5 minutes and get an estimate of how much calcium you need. Total daily, 700 to 1,000 milligrams. Very few people need more than 500 milligrams of calcium from tablets. Sorry for the long answer, but it's just trying to deal with both questions. Orlando Jamaat bo shant che. Ke bo moru tu che. Is there Fatiha after this? We're all waiting for the Fatiha. No other question? Okay. All right.
Good. Girl wants to recite Dua Faraj. Give me 1 second. And Ziyarat
Supposed to.
Okay, so there's a girl who will recite Dua Faraj after you.
After she wants to do first? What
I need to look for her. So I shall look her and then I'll get her too.
Okay, so after the Ziyarat I stop.
Yeah.
Assalamu alayka ya Rasulallah. Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Assalamu alayki ya Fatimah al-Zahra Sayyidati Nisa'il Alameen. Assalamu alayka ya Hasan al-Mujtaba. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Adama Sifatillah. Assalamu alayka ya Waritha Nuhin Nabiyallah. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام ولي الله السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثار والوتر الموتور أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بي يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها ولم تلبسك من مدلهمات ثيابها وأشهد أنك من دائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرزي الزكي الهادي المهدي وأشهد أن الأئمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والأروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبيا بكم موقن بشرع ديني وخواتم عملي وقلبي لقلبكم سلم وأمري لأمركم متبع صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم ولا أجسادكم ولا أجسامكم ولا شاهدكم ولا غائبكم ولا ظاهركم ولا باطنكم السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله السلام عليك يا ابن نبي الله السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن الحسين الشهيد السلام عليك أيها الشهيد السلام عليك أيها المظلوم وابن المظلوم لعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة سميت بذلك فرزيت بي السلام عليكم يا أولياء الله وأحباءه السلام عليكم يا أصفياء الله ووداء السلام عليكم يا أنصار دين الله السلام عليكم يا أنصار رسول الله السلام عليكم يا أنصار أمير المؤمنين السلام عليكم يا أنصار فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي محمد الحسن بن علي الولي الزكي الناصر السلام عليكم يا أنصار أبي عبد الله بأبي أنتم وأمي تبتم وتعبت الأرض التي فيها دفنتم وفزتم فوزا عظيما فيا ليتني كنت معكم فأفوز معكم السلام عليك يا أبا الفضل العباس ابن أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوصيين السلام عليك يا ابن أول القوم إسلاما وأقدمهم إيمانا وأقومهم بدين الله وأحوتهم على الإسلام أشهد لقد نصحت لله ولرسوله ولأخيك فنعم الأخ المواسي فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك ولعن الله أمة استحلت منك المحارم وانتهكت حرمة الإسلام فنعم الصابر المجاهد المحامي الناصر والأخ الدافع عن أخيه المجيب إلى طاعة ربه الراغب فيما زاد في غيره من الثواب الجزيل والثناء الجميل والحقك الله بدرجة آبائك في جنات النعيم اللهم إني تعرضت لزيارة أوليائك رغبة في ثوابك ورجاء لمغفرتك وجزيل إحسانك فأسألك أن تصلي على محمد وآله الطاهرين وأن تجعل رزقي بهم دار وعيش بهم قار وزيارتي بهم مقبولة وحياتي بهم طيبة وأدرجني إدراج المكرمين واجعلني ممن ينقلب من زيارة مشاهد أحبائك مفلحا منجها قد استوجب غفران الذنوب وستر العيوب وكشف الكروب إنك أهل التقوى وأهل المغفرة السلام عليك يا ساداتي وموالي جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليكم أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي السلام عليكم يا إمام صاحب العصر والزمان الأمان 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 السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان السلام عليك إمام الإنس والجان أجر الله تعالى فرجك وسهر الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك وجعلنا من أنصارك ورحمة الله وبركاته اللهم صل اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا حافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على
Thank you.
You're on the